Over the past 5+ years, we've done over $119 million at Closers.io, and in this video, I'm going to show you every single funnel that we've used to successfully generate revenue along the way. So what we're going to do is there's about 11 to 12. You'll see what I mean. There's kind of like 11 and a half. And we're going to cover the easiest, simplest, and kind of best stuff for beginners first, as well as the stuff that I used earlier in my career. So you can kind of get an idea of like the stuff I was doing in the beginning versus the stuff I'm doing now that we're doing multiple 8 figures a year. And then, so, it goes without saying, more of the advanced and higher scale stuff will be towards the end. So if you're more advanced and you're watching this, stay to the end because you're going to get an idea of what I'm doing now, as well as some of the more advanced kind of nuances of the funnels we're using, so on and so forth. And then what I'll do for each of these is kind of share my rough results with each, like how it worked for me, what the key points are, what the common pitfalls are, some basic recommendations. I'm also going to give you the 3 to 5 best KPIs to monitor for every single funnel. So every single funnel, 11 and a half of these, so to speak, is going to be mapped out on this document. So DM me funnels. It has to be funnels with an S on Instagram, and I'll send you this document for free. My Instagram's at ColeThomasGordon, so you can pull that up now, DM me on Instagram, and you can follow through with me as I go through this. So the first one is Facebook Organic. So I know there's nothing like groundbreaking here, but I actually scaled this to really, depending on, I kind of combined it with a different method in a second that I'm going to cover, but I was anywhere between 200 to 500 grand a month just with this. Okay. So like this actually really worked for me. So who it's for is obviously people just starting off. Granted, like one of my biggest regrets is as soon as I got asked to work at a really high multiple 8-figure scale, I just totally quit doing this, which I totally regret because that was 200 to 500 grand a month I was just making for free, organically, no ad spend. But I was so tired of doing it by the time I got ads to crack that I just kind of gave up on it. The other thing this works really well for, surprisingly, is any offer that's geared towards the internet marketing community. For whatever reason, they're just all on Facebook. And if you're on, if you're like in a SaaS community, like a lot of that is X and LinkedIn. So kind of knowing, because this strategy would work more or less what I'm talking about. Obviously, the content's going to change, but the strategy I'm talking about, especially with how you're going to do the conversations, we work on Instagram, we work on X, we work on LinkedIn, obviously on Facebook. So, if you know your industry, you'll kind of know where most of those people congregate between all of those platforms if this is something you want to do. Okay, so like I just said, this will work on LinkedIn, IG, X, etc. Obviously, the content's going to change, but like the CTA strategy I'm going to talk about isn't. So basically, what you're going to do is you're going to post. Now, every post, it's going to fall into one of 3 categories. I don't care what platform it is. It's either going to be a direct call to action. So like on Instagram, for instance, even though this is about Facebook, I'm just going to give you an example. On Instagram, like the common direct call to action you see is the I'm looking for 5 guys, right? So I'm looking for X people who want a Y in this time frame. So we're going to get a group of people together. We're going to achieve 3 main outcomes. It's going to be bam, 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 and bam. And we're going to do this without bam, 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 and bam. And then, you CTA, DM me if you're interested, right? That's like a direct call to action. That can work on Facebook, by the way, LinkedIn. That can work. And as reused as that is, that still really works quite well to this day. So another example of a direct is my first, not my first, but one of my Facebook posts was just read if you need sitters. It was like, I have 30 plus sitters in my pipeline right now. These are people with these candidates. So if you're looking for somebody who can 1, 2, 3, 4, DM me. So this was in June of 2020. I remember when I posted this, that one post, it's 169 grand or 68 grand, something like that. So obviously those direct posts can pull a ton of money. So obviously you have direct. That's where you make a direct call to action. Pretty simple. Then you have, on the other side of the spectrum, value, where it's basically just pure value. Now, you might throw in a PS at the end. Hey, by the way, if you're looking to do this, DM me or whatever it is. But, then you have pure value, okay? And then in between that, you have indirect, where it's basically value for like 80% of it, and then it ties into a call to action at the end. So you might be telling a story about something that happened in your life yesterday and how that lesson gave you a great sales lesson. And if you have that problem, DM me, right? So you're probably, if you're watching this video, you're probably familiar with this. Any social platform, whatever it is, like for instance, a Twitter thread, if you have a Twitter thread that's like 8 things, but the Twitter thread kind of weaves into a call to action at the end, like you're kind of framing their beliefs, so it weaves into that call to action at the end, that's technically indirect, right? But also on Twitter, if you had a big audience and they're very engaged, you could probably just hit a direct, or you could do something that's value and at the very end add a PS. So any platform falls in with those 3 content formats. Okay, so with that being said, that's going to prompt a certain type of lead, right? So let's say you're driving everything to the DMs. You're either going to get a lead that's direct or a lead that's indirect, okay? So a direct lead means they're reaching out specifically to learn about working with you, okay? So in this context, what we're going to do, this is very important, is we're going to have what's called a direct messenger combo. Now, obviously, I probably have other stuff on the channel that is like all the scripting for this and all that stuff. I could do future videos on it. Our program talks about it. That whole training would be like 20 minutes, so I'm not going to go through it now. But what you need to know is the direct messenger combo script, if they're reaching out directly to work with you, is like 2 or 3 messages, okay? It's very, very simple. It's not hard, all right? Now, let's say you CTA, but it's like, hey, you know, it's like a 2-step type of thing. Like, hey, I have this training, DM me if you want the training, okay? So that's indirect because they're not directly reaching out to work with you, but they're still a lead. They're reaching out for this lead magnet, but what you want to do is pivot that conversation into a actual, you know, sales conversation where you can get on a sales call, etc. So that's where you would go through a longer indirect script. Now, the reason I bring this up is almost everybody, what they do is they essentially treat every lead like an indirect, where it's a super long qualifying sales script and you have tons of drop off. And so what I recommend is, especially when the DMs are direct, is it should be 2 to 3 questions. Then you send them the calendar link. Now, here's what's key. That calendar link should look like a naked calendar link, like it's like Calendly or something, or OneShub, to where it's like your personal link, even if it's going to your sales team. And then from there, it redirects to an application, and then that's where all the qualifying happens. You'll get way better info through the application after they've already micro-committed to booking a call than you will otherwise. If they don't book that, then you can just reach back out and be like, hey, I noticed you didn't book this. Will you fill this out before the call so we can hit the ground running? Okay? So that's how this works. So anyways, it can work on any social platform. It's a great way to start. My results with this, and by the way, when I was throwing out those numbers, I did have one salesperson, but I scaled to 200 grand a month by myself, okay? No help. I was doing all the sales. I was doing all the setting, everything. And most everything was direct, by the way, all my conversations. So it wasn't like I was in Messenger for like eons. And then even as we scaled, I actually hired a salesperson, and I just went full-time setter because it was very easy. And I was just setting up appointments like crazy. And within like a couple months, we were at like 500 grand a month, still with basically this funnel, okay? So what were my results with this? Well, I kind of just mentioned it. I was able to get to about 300 to 500 grand a month. It was somewhere around there. It's hard to know exactly what it did because, as you'll see in not the next funnel, but the one after, I kind of combined this with another thing. So it's hard to know which one generated which. But a few reasons this worked for me in retrospect. My Facebook friend list, because I was in sales for so long, I had basically generated 5,000 friends that were all in my target market, because before every sales call, I'd send somebody a request on Facebook. So that was actually really lucky that I did that. My target market was the IM community at first. Now we've expanded in many different industries, but at first it was really like an IM community type of offer, which is highly active on Facebook organic. Plus, just with our offer timing, it was at the time I did this offer, it was quite good timing in which there wasn't a lot of other people doing it. And so the content I was putting out was getting more resonance because of that. And also the offer was getting more resonance. I don't know if this would work as well now. I'm sure it would, but probably not as well as when I was doing it. The other thing that really, really helped me, I just think this is more of a business lesson, not a funnel lesson. But because of my sales background, I was able to start charging as high as price as possible, like 15K plus. And because I was good at sales, I was able to close like 60 to 70% of those leads. And then on top of that, because I was also good at sales and good at delivery, I was able to upgrade people to continuity and keeping working with me 50% plus on my clients. So because of that, I was basically doing 200-300 grand a month with like 2-3 employees tops. I mean, like when I hired my first like real employee, I was already doing probably like 180, 170, like 90% profit margin. And that's so important because it allowed me to make those first 1 to 2, 3 hires almost like executive level hires and not like frontlines employees like most people do, because I had so much more profit to be able to put forward into that. So that was pretty cool. Real quick, and then we'll get back to the video. If you need help with any of these 3 things, either installing a lead acquisition internally in your business, you need new sales reps, and you want sales reps recruited done for you, and also get the sales consulting and sales management help that comes with that. Or if you just want overall business strategies of how you can scale to 8 figures or beyond, go to the link in the description, click that link, check out the video, and then book a call with our team. We'd love to help you with any of those 3 things. Now back to the video. So the next one, and this kind of plays off the last one, is the IG boosted posts. So this is one that can work at all revenue levels. but it's really good if starting off, and it's really good if you already have some traction on IG already. It's good for like IG friendly audiences. So generally like B2C or like prosumer type of audiences, like low level e-commerce businesses, stuff like that, fitness relationships, make money online, stuff like that. It can all, and like I said, it can be used to supplement an already working or existing IG strategy. Maybe you run shout outs and you supplement it with this a little bit, etc. Okay. So how does it work? Well, it's pretty freaking simple. You have a post on Instagram, you boost it. Now there's a couple different ways you can format the post you boost, right? It could just be one of your top performing posts in which you're going to get mainly followers. It could be a post that's like, I'm looking for 5 people who want to X, like a direct post, and then you're going to get DMs. It could be indirect, like, hey, you call out a pain point, a little bit of copy, and then you CTA to more of like a training. Hey, I have a free resource, I'll send it over to you. So that's indirect. So again, depending on if you get a follower, direct DM and indirect, or some people will just click your link in bio, it's going to go through a different sales process, right? So like if they follow you, you're to use the indirect follower script, which is very close to the indirect like lead magnet script, okay? To where you're going to have to extend that conversation a little bit because they're not intent based. You have to sell them and actually going on the call. Obviously direct, 2-3 messages, you send them the calendar link, boom, sales call. And then also I'd have something in your link in bio, even if it's just like a link to a short, like 2-3 minute VSL that explains what you do and adds social proof, and then an app, right? Because some people will just book through that, even if mostly what you're going through is DMs. Okay. So, here I would say, do the setting yourself at first, but eventually you're definitely going to need a setter to do this. I've already explained, like there's 2 main scripts, right? There's indirect or direct. Like in all messenger and setter conversations that are over chat, always ask yourself, is this indirect or direct conversation? Because it's going to change what the script actually is. The only difference is in the indirect, the opening is a little bit different if you're doing the follower versus a not follower. Okay. I recommend using some sort of like CRM for this. There's like tons of like IGDM type CRMs. The best companies who do IGDMs at scale, they use shifts. So it's all throughout the night, 24/7. So, that tends to work pretty well. A lot of people do get them from South Africa. We place people like that. If you're interested in getting like a high quality DM setter or what have you, those are very easy for us to do. Just keep in mind the biggest mistake here, and I already covered this in my last thing, is that people will do way too much overqualifying in the messenger conversation. Oftentimes, again, it can be like 2-3 questions. It really should all be about selling the conversation, and then all the qualifying, like how much money do you have, or are you serious about this? When are you ready to take action now? Like if you're doing any of that stuff, leave that for after they book and it redirects to the app, because it'll mitigate tons of fall off. You'll get way more conversions and they will just fill out the app. So I see this mistake all the time. Just sell them on the conversation, book them, and then everything goes to the app. At first, what I would do is, instead of going direct to triage, so like a 15-minute call, then a 60-minute call, try to go direct to the sales call at first and validate that. Because if you could pull that off, that's much better than going to the 15-minute call, because you'll have less drop off, of course. And this is what I wanted to say is, so, this was not something I necessarily did in my, let's say, 0 to $1 million a month journey, right? But this is something we do a little bit of now, not necessarily boosting the post, but we do kind of all these setter processes, because since we run so much ads, obviously some people, if they see an ad on Instagram, what do? They don't click the ad. They go to your link in bio, or they go to your profile. They check out your content, whatever. So you'll see the CTAs. They might give you a follow, and then we'll reach out through that, even if they didn't book through the ad. So to a degree, almost everybody should have some function of this. If you run, like, even if you're a really, really high level person and you run ads, it can be worth having like one setter just like DMing every single follower. It's just free money, basically. So we're doing like an extra 100, 200 grand a month from this. And so think about it. Like, how much better would your ads work if you were doing an extra 100 to 200 grand a month from your ads? It's obviously, it makes a big difference, even if you're doing millions a month, and that doesn't seem like a lot. That's really all going to fall to profit, because that's money otherwise you wouldn't have got, right? Obviously, you're going to use the organic content to produce DM conversations and indirect conversations and all of that as well. It's not just obviously the boosted posts. So it's definitely worth doing, whether you're beginner or advanced, etc. So the next one, and just to give you a little spoiler, I would say this funnel is relatively dead, but I do want to cover it because it was a big part of what I did to scale to like my first 500 grand a month, is the Facebook group funnel. So I'm not going to cover this in too much depth because I think that unless you're in a B2C type audience that's like very, very green, like untapped, like a blue ocean, it's fatigued quite a bit. And Facebook engagement on groups is just terrible. But what we used to do is some sort of ad or free resource to an opt-in. You would get the name, email, phone number, and then the thank you page would drive to the group. And what we would do is it would drive to the group, but we'd have a 4-second bridge page that would be pixeled. So that way we could optimize the ads for Facebook group joins. And then the main thing is that we would have the setters basically reach out to every single group join over Facebook Messenger. And then that's where the majority of the sets would come from. We'd also have the setters text everybody. We'd also have a good email responder, booking calls, and then a good email broadcast sequence as well. We also have the setters calling people, okay, which I would recommend using Dialer.io for that. So then you would get them in the group. Then in the group, you do like one kind of webinar type of thing a week. You would you would do like a 60-minute live training. You would promote like 2 days leading up to that, then like maybe do a 2-step afterwards to kind of clean up. And so that's kind of the content rhythm that you would do to keep it easy. So what I would do is I would post one YouTube video a week, and then I would take that YouTube video and then I would just do it as a live stream also in the Facebook group. And then that way it kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's basically it for this. The only time I'd really recommend this now is if you, for some reason, just had a really good like green untapped audience, or like you happen to already have a Facebook group and you want to capitalize on it. Or if you have a huge organic audience, like on YouTube, you could move them to like a school group or a Facebook group just kind of as a bonus, and it will create a lot of setting opportunities that way. So that's obviously an option as well. But I pretty much covered all of this. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but this is what I was alluding to earlier. This combined with just basic Facebook organic got me to like $500 a month. Okay, with very, very little. I don't even think we did any ads. Like we maybe did a little bit of ads for this, but we were basically all organic. So, again, I think it worked better because groups weren't as saturated as then. And then also like really when I pivoted my offer, that's when I exploded from about 200 to like 500, then got ads validated, went to $1 million a month, so on and so forth. So next one, which is a really, really good funnel. This works really well now, is the DM ads funnel. So this is where you do a 1 to 3 minute ad, and basically everything you need to say to get somebody to book a call needs to be in this ad, okay? It's going to go to a DM. Now, this ad, I would prefer to do it direct, but you can do it indirect as well. So like I would prefer to basically make it to where they're reaching out because they're interested in working with you. That's what I mean by direct, of course. But you could also offer a free training. And then in that conversation, you're going to use the indirect messenger script. Okay, so we've already covered this. There's a direct messaging, indirect. You would go the indirect route. But I would try direct if you can. And then same as I've already talked about, I would try to just go direct the sales call and just send them the calendar link and have them apply, have it redirect to the application. And then that way you can bypass the 15-minute triage. But sometimes with this funnel, sometimes the 15-minute triage works. I just always try to go direct to closer and only use the 15-minute triage if absolutely necessary, because at scale, they'll start to create a lot more inefficiency, okay? So who's this for? Again, it's excellent. It still works really well now. It's excellent for beginners, especially B2C. If you're B2B or even B2Solopreneur, I would, like B2Solopreneurs, like you go after a coach, an insurance agent, a real estate agent, stuff like that, right? If you're B2B or B2Solopreneur, I would do the next one, which is a small adjustment essentially to this one, okay? This is also a great supplement if you're already doing the IGDM boosted post. This is kind of like the next thing I would do. Or if you're doing shout outs, this is a good thing to supplement that. I've already covered, try to do it direct. You can test indirect as well. If it's direct, you could probably handle the setting yourself. It's like not that much until you get a decent amount of ad spend. Then you can obviously hire a setter. Already covered, try to go direct to sales call first. You do all the selling you want to do in the ad. Like 100% of this funnel comes down to what the ad is. Like the 100% the success or failure is just the ad, okay? Unless you run this to like a B2B audience, okay? And in that case, it could just be the funnel's the issue. But if you're B2C and you have a great ad, this will most likely work, okay? I'm not going to say it's the best funnel to get to $1 million a month. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about going from, 10 to your first 100 grand a month, okay? But this does tend to break a little bit more at scale. It's a good funnel though to quickly, just because it only takes an ad to do. It's good to really test like all sorts of different messaging and different offers without having to like redo an entire funnel. That's why I really like it for low scale folks. So in terms of KPIs, so I'm going to cover this once, but for all like call funnel associated funnels, this is really how you need to think about doing your KPIs. I'll give you some benchmarks, but really what you're going to do is you're going to take your price. So let's say it's 10K. You're going to divide it by 5. Okay. So in that case, you're going to have 2,000, right? That's your target CPA. And that's your maximum allowable CPA. I generally wouldn't, I would try to shoot for lower than that, but that would be my maximum allowable. Then what you would want to do is basically, I don't think it's divide, I think it's multiply that by 22.5% closing ratio, right? Which should give you your total cost per live call. So in this example, if we have 2,000 times 0.225, that would give me a $450 cost per live call allowable. So that's after show rate. And then what you can do is you can take your show rate and also the amount of qualified apps, et cetera, that go on there, and you can kind of reverse engineer back what your net gross cost per call should be, right? So like your cost per call might be $200, but after canceling applications, no shows, et cetera, you end at $450 cost per live call at 22.5% closing ratio. That's about where you want to be to get a $2,000 CPA, okay? So as my benchmarks would be, and you know, it's tough to give benchmarks because they vary at scale. Like obviously at a lower scale, you should get better numbers. At a higher scale, you're going to have to afford higher numbers, which is why at a higher scale, you need stuff like your back end, so on and so forth. But by my overall benchmarks, if you're B2C, your cost per book call should be below $300 and your CPA below 2,000. B2B, it would be $4,000 or $400 cost per call and cost per acquisition, 3,000. Again, like I gave you these are like maximum allowable numbers. If you were starting off with this, I would want to see you much cheaper. Okay. But it's tough because some people watch this channel are doing millions a month. Well, you're going to have a higher KPI at that point. So it kind of varies. All right. So my results with this, we do the B2B version of this, which I'm going to cover next. But client-wise, this is really our go-to for helping clients get from like 10K a month to their first 100 grand a month. Okay. So the next one is the direct to app funnel. So that's the B2B version of this. So this is very, very similar. You basically do the same exact ad, but you just do it right to an application and not to the DMs. So this works much better if like you have like a SaaS or if you have a B2B like service-based offering that's just very cut and dry and clear, or you're working with more professionals. Like if you work with like roofers, like you're not going to probably get them in the DMs. Like you just want them to apply, like they just want to get to the point, book a call, etc. So they apply, book a call, sales call. And then the key thing is here is you do want a setter and about a 1 setter for every 2 closers ratio to hit all the partial apps. So make sure you use like a Typeform type thing where you get the partial apps. You hit the 2 grade apps, which I'm not going to go into detail on what a 2 grade app is, but in previous videos, I talked about lead scoring and there's 1, 2, 3s, and 4s. 1s get canceled, 2s are going to go to the setters. So the setters will obviously hit those. And then email is going to hit like all your no-shows, your partial apps, et cetera, as your list builds. That's not going to be a ton of volume, but at scale, it does make a difference. So who's this for? Again, it's great for beginners, but I mean, we still use this now. So, I mean, you can use this all the way from just starting off to millions a month, okay? It tends to scale a little bit better than the DM funnel just because of the operational complexity of the DMs. And it works for all niches too. So this will work in B2C, but also like it's a good one to start off with if you're more B2 solopreneur or B2B. So the key points of this, again, similar to the beginning or similar to the previous one we talked about, it's all about the ad. You can be direct in the ad from the beginning. Like you've probably seen like the, you know, we'll do this or that, or you don't pay. Like you can have something like that. Or what you can do that's even more effective that I really like is you start indirect. So with a little bit of content for like the first 30 seconds of the ad or the first 3 or 4 lines of copy. And then you kind of pivot to direct later. Okay. And doing it that way helps you, like if you don't want to like give a crazy guarantee or you don't want to like, or if that's super saturated in your market, this will give you a lot more variation. So like, for instance, we have an ad that talks about, hey, there's like one hire that you can add to your business that for us on average generates an extra 100 grand a month per hire, right? It's not this person, not that person. It's totally overlooked. And the best part is they also do this, this, and this, and this. It's actually an appointment setter. And so if that's interesting to you, here's our offer to you. We'll do 1, 2, 3, and 4. And, you know, we'll do that within this time frame, right? So you can see how, because it's content and it leads into the ad later, you don't have to be as aggressive with like the directness and the guarantee or whatever, because essentially you already caught their eye with the indirect content. Because the reasons these direct offers and direct ads have to be so aggressive is because since you're leading with that, the offer itself has to be like scroll stopping and like, you know, attention getting. Okay. So I really like the indirect to the direct because as we're doing this, it also like, there's only so many different ways you can have a direct offer. So like you can state what your offer is, right? So doing it indirect first, by the essence of it, creates a lot more variations. Hopefully that makes sense. So Oh, another thing too is like what's really strange is we've tested with this funnel, like direct to app. We basically put our VSL, which is like 25 minutes long and some offers, as the ad and just went right to the application. And then that crushed it. So like these ads can be 1 to 3 minutes is kind of my standard, but you can try 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 25 minutes. Like I used to run I think it was like a 36-minute ad to an application and it crushed. So, I mean, it can kind of work in a lot of different ways. Now, the key thing that we're getting into here compared to all the other funnels is by this point, you have to have a really good sales ops system. So you have to have a great system for app grading, double single booking logic, really to maximize the calendar efficiency, make sure the closer's rating 3+ offers per day per closer. So if you want to learn more about that, I have a whole video on it it's called Fix Your Show Rates, but it's really about implementing good sales ops. So you can check that out if you want to. It's in this document. So the setters already covered that. They're hitting 2 apps, no shows. They're hitting the partials. Typically with this, because you're not going to have that opt-in volume, it's about 1 setter for every 2 closers. Okay. Now, if you can get similar numbers, we'll talk about this with this later. If this compares to a VSL or not, it really depends, but we'll cover that when we get to the VSL. One thing I really like about this is if you're trying to scale, for instance, and if you're trying to scale and if you run a lot of traffic, you'll know what I'm talking about. As you get to several 100,000 a month in spend, you kind of can't scale the same messaging much further. It depends on the market, of course, but you might hit a cap of your messaging. So what you need to do is fundamentally test like different pain points or fundamentally different kind of offers or feelings. It all ties back to the same offer, but you're testing sort of different pockets of the audience to where they might resonate with different pain points or different faces or different different ways to portray your offer and so on and so forth. So as you're trying to do that and scale it, it becomes very hard to do that if you have to replicate a VSL for every single different like sub-market or pain point or whatever, like new messaging that you're doing. So this is a really great funnel because you can just scale to those pockets with these 1 to 3 minute ads. So it's a really great way to test different pockets that could be good. And then you can build out a full funnel later. So what I mean by this is, for instance, if you've seen our ads recently, like we started in the high ticket space, but then we progressed to where we also like target tax professionals. We've always worked with them. We've just never targeted them in our messaging. Same thing with like medical clinics. We've always worked with them, but we never targeted them in our messaging. So like this was a good way to validate those pockets of audiences before actually scaling into them. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. And then again, if you have like a B2B or a SaaS offer, like Hyros is a great example. It's almost counterproductive to do anything but this because the offer is so clear and it's such a no-brainer that you just need to send them right to the application. Okay, like this is really what, for the most part, I think Hormozi's funnel was with Gym Launch because they had such a direct offer. They just sent them right to there. So now, what this doesn't work for as well is if your offer takes far more education. So a great example is RCA. So RCA was a program that went after people who wanted to make money online and kind of communicated to them that, hey, like if all you want to do is create this amount of income and do it remotely, like you don't have to do all these complexities and all this crazy stuff in starting a business. You can actually just learn this skill and then go work with other business owners and have all those things you want without all of the negatives. Okay. So that like messaging took a lot more education, right? I had to break down some limiting beliefs and rebuild some empowering beliefs to get them in the buying pocket for what I had to offer, right? So it kind of went like this. Like the first part of my messaging was like motivating them to get out of their 9 to 5 and do something with their life. Then I was like, well, hey, you probably heard about online business and all this other stuff, but like it's not really necessary to get these things you want. And it has all these problems. You got to hire employees, you got to do tech stack, you got to learn all these skills. What's much easier and faster is remote closing. And then the best way to do that is through us. So I would tell a story that would break down those limiting beliefs and reinstall the beliefs I wanted to get them in the frame of mind to book an offer with me about remote closing. Okay. So obviously with all of that education, something like this is not going to work. Right. And just to be clear, like you might not understand my market with this, but I couldn't just go out there and be like, hey, if you want to become a high ticket closer, click this ad, and just it's right to the app. Right there wasn't enough like existing market for that. So what I had to do is take the existing market of people who wanted to do affiliate marketing, drop shipping, Amazon, etc., and channel that into my new opportunity. So this is what Eugene Schwartz calls channeling desire, not just putting your offer right in front of the desire. Now, pro tip, if you can just put your offer right in front of the desire, that works really well. Like that's what we do with our sales recruiting offer. It's just right in front. But what we did here is we had to take existing demand and existing desire and channel that into new demand. Hopefully that makes sense. So KPIs of how you would do this, same exact as what we already talked about. You would want to calculate your own by kind of using this basic formula, and then the benchmarks are relatively the same. Okay, so my results of this, we still use this, and we do multiple eight figures a year, so it works. Okay, the next one is, I've alluded to this already, is the call funnel. Okay, so this is where you obviously run an ad, it goes to an opt-in, you get name, email, phone number. Personally, I tested removing that phone number, and I don't see much better results in terms of bookings. And then what I get from the setters by adding the phone number far outweighs that. So definitely have a phone number. You're gonna want to make sure that phone number is validated. You have there's a script you can add to your ClickFunnels or whatever you use to make sure that they could only use real phone numbers. Then you have like some sort of VSL that could be direct, which is like you state the offer, it's 5 minutes, it's just right to it. Or you have indirect, which is kind of like what I was mentioning with RCA, where it's a lot longer, has a little bit more education process. Then you go to an application, sales call. The real key with this, and the reason, to my knowledge, I've been able to scale call funnels much further than really anybody else in the market that I know that is not famous, basically. Like if they're, if you're famous, it's all bets are off. But for the most part, there might be some B2C people that have scaled it higher than me, but especially in the B2B market, there's nobody. And what really, really makes a huge difference is having the setters reach out to all of these opt-ins. So like when we were running this for RCA, 70% of our closes came from the opt-ins and just the setters calling them and just setting them directly for a sales call. So a couple things with this is before there was a lot of different things that you would have to implement. Now, one of my peers, and he used to have a sales agency, Sales Sniper, Matt Ryder, he created a software that's a very sales-focused dialer called Dialer.io. Basically, it does all the things that you would need to implement manually by yourself. It does it for you, and it's far more effective in terms of answer rates than anything I've ever tested before, and I get pitched this stuff all the time. So just have your setters use Dialer.io, make sure their talk time is very, very good, and then they can just sit, press call, it'll do everything for them, and you're going to get really, really great results of this if your setters are well trained, okay? If your setters don't get closes, if their appointments are showing up, that's not a process issue, that's like a setter issue. Like they stink. You need to train them better. And it could be their process too, like their setting process, but you get what I'm saying. And then the other thing is email. We'll talk about that in a second. So who is this for? All revenue levels, works really well at scale and high scale. It's probably not where I'd start if you're like a beginner and you don't have a lot of marketing savvy. I would go with one of the things we've already covered. But this works for B2B, B2C, B2Solopreneur. It's kind of like the standard of our industry, as you probably already know. So big thing here is, do you have an opt-in page or not an opt-in page? So if you looked at my funnels, I've used both, okay? So here's kind of the metric you want to use. If you test it without an opt-in, okay? If you get above like a 30 to 40% lift, then keep it without an opt-in. If not, you're likely going to be better off with an opt-in because you're going to get so many more bookings from setters, and you're going to get a lot of bookings driven from email and a much longer term list build, which really helps you smooth out ad volatility in the long run. So I prefer, if possible, to have an opt-in. Now, in B2B markets, the last 18 months, I'd say, I've seen it more and more to where if I put an opt-in in there, just like my cost per book call is like $1,000 plus. So it just doesn't even work. Right. So I have to go direct to the application, and I'll basically go add, and then it just none of this, and it's just direct to VSL and it's apply below. Right. So I'll do it like that. So, but if you can pull it off, like with RCA, if we ran this again, it would be 100% having an opt-in because we got so much traction purely just from the setters. So that's kind of the logic you need to think through this with. Okay. Also, we already covered, like, it's very, very key. You have a high level sales system for this, or sales ops system. I already linked the video. You can go through that. If you just want everything done for you through tech, we use SalesKick, which is a SaaS my CMO developed. It basically does the entire sales ops system for you for less money than it's going to cost you to hire the people that you're going to need to be able to do it. So that's SalesKick. You can check it out. Now, with the setters, I've already mentioned this, but I just see so many people sleep on what they're like the setters in general. They may have them, but they don't realize how big of a lever that is in this funnel. So again, just to reemphasize, with RCA, with our B2B, we get about probably 35% of our closes from sets, which is a lot considering we don't even have an opt-in, okay? With RCA, it was like 70 to, it might have been like 80%. And the reason is if your setters are very well trained, the sets will show much higher and they'll close much higher, which makes sense because they've actually talked to a real person and that real person has really sold them on booking the call. But again, your setters have to be good. And the big issue with the call funnels the last 2 years is, and I think it was June of 2023, yes, it was 2023, Google made basically an update to Gmail and Google Calendar to where the appointment will automatically show up unless they've already corresponded with that domain. So what that means is if you're running a call funnel, people are booking calls, unless they manually add it to their calendar, it will not show up on their calendar. So that's tanked across the board show rates by about 10%, which totally sucks. So this is why the setters are just right now more important than they've ever been. Make sure you use Dialer.io and then make sure you text and call. Like, so sometimes people, I'll be talking to them about their setter performance and they're only calling and not texting. And I'm like, man, we get most of the volume off of texting. Because it's just so easy to text a person. They're already interested. It's a 2-3 message script. And then boom, they're on a triage call with the setter. And then boom, sales call. So very, very easy. With email, what's very, very key is we do a 8 to 10 email. It might be 9 email. I forget the exact number. But it's 8 to 10 autoresponder. Mostly driving to a call. That lifts performance by a ton. We get hundreds of calls from that. And then after that, we send an email every single day to the list. Okay? If you don't get 20% of your bookings and or sales from email, email is underperforming. So you need to get that. We get probably like 15% and we don't even have an opt-in. So like you with an opt-in, you should definitely get like 20, maybe even 25. I think with RCA, we probably had about 20, 25-ish, somewhere around there. Now, indirect versus direct. So should you go a longer VSL with more education first and belief reframing, or should you just state the offer? Generally, what I recommend is starting with direct is just a little bit easier to do, and then testing that against indirect. Just know that indirect can beat direct, but your copywriting chop's got to be pretty good. So like you really have to actually like study copywriting, study all the greats, study the best VSLs out there, and like really put like an effort into this. Like my first indirect VSL, it took me 2 months of writing or 2 months to create it between research and writing it. Okay, like I really went deep into this. So see a lot of people want to do indirect because they think people might be more educated or whatever. But if your copy and your VSL and all of these things stink, then it's not really going to matter. So KPIs, same thing we already covered. My results with this, we've scaled 3 multiple 8-figure companies with this. One, my B2B, my B2C, which is RCA. And then, I scaled a medical clinic chain from 1 location at $50K a month to 6 locations at $3 million a month, I think, $2.5 million a month, which is VSLs. So it definitely works across a lot of different industries. It's one of my favorite funnels. And then we're going to move on to the next one, which is cold outbound /email. So this is one of my favorites, but it's much tougher to get to work than you think. So just to be clear, who this is for, if you are like a beginner and you have no funds, you could do the manual version for this. I wouldn't do like the fully automated version. You could just send 20 emails a day across 3 inboxes or 30 emails a day across 3 inboxes. And probably get some leads and then be able to get some cash flow to be able to kind of like scale and, reinvest that into ads. But like to do the full version of this, I would recommend only doing that if you have an extremely small TAM under 20K, because if you can run ads, just run ads. It's just much easier to get to your first 7 figures and beyond. Now, what's funny is like cold email or cold outbound in general, I used to think was like totally for beginners. And then as I've gotten more experienced, I've really realized to scale, at least in the B2B service, to scale to 9 figures and beyond, you have to have a cold email I keep saying cold email, but just a cold outbound in general function for 2 reasons. Number one, at a higher level, it's much more scalable because there's less diminishing returns, whereas ads, there's a lot more diminishing returns. And then the other thing is it allows you to more effectively go up market because you can target better. So I'll get into the funnel in a second, but this is kind of the graph to explain it. So with ads, you could see like it is explosive at first, but a lot of companies will hit 10 to 20 million a year. And then it's just like, it's so tough to get your metrics financially to work after that and to eke out any more scale unless you fundamentally pivot the offer and move to a self-liquidating model, which we'll talk about later. But then even if you do that, eventually you're still going to get to the point where it plateaus like this. Whereas cold outbound is very slow, but very linear and highly scalable, especially if you can move up market and increase your deal size. Okay. So how this works is the main thing is data collection. And that's where everybody overlooks and everybody is super lazy. So you need to have basically a team of manual people who are somewhat smart enough to know what it's like. They need to be, in my opinion, better than VAs. because they need to be able to know who your market is, not just demographically, but also like psychographically. Okay. So they need to be able to find those leads. Then when they find them, use certain tech that's out there. There's Seamless.ai. There's all sorts of stuff you can use to basically complete the lead. So to find, and we use different, like, we'll use like 2 or 3 different platforms for this. So we can make sure we get every phone number that's out there, every email that's out there, every LinkedIn that's, you know, they only have one LinkedIn, but we'll find their LinkedIn, etc. We'll get their Instagram. So we complete like a full lead profile for this person. And then we put it through validation, which means we use separate different softwares to make sure all of those are accurate. Anything that's not accurate or not real time, we'll take out. And then what we do is we have that same team personalize it, which really means just write the first part of the email that's personalized to every single person, because the rest is a template. And then it becomes a completed lead. So once it's a completed lead, we'll give 40 to 50 of those to the outbound SDRs a week, and then they're to do 40 to 50 emails a day, and then about 20 plus LinkedIn messages. You can kind of scale the LinkedIn messages if you play around with more inboxes and a bunch of different stuff. I'll leave that for another video. And then also 150 plus dials a day. If you get Dialer.io, again, you could probably do 300 plus dials a day because it's much, much more efficient. So you'll have a certain amount of leads. And generally, it's, I think I said 40 to 50 a day or a week. It's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it's 100 per week generally. But it also depends on your market and the contact ability of them. So you're going to have to kind of measure and move up or move down that KPI. But the main thing that has really worked well for us over the years is moving this to an outreach manager. Now, this can be somebody who's on this team who uses something like Mailshake or ListKit. There's like a ton of different softwares that do this. And generally with that, like, you want burner domains. So like, I would not want to send, for instance, from closers.io because I could burn my main domain. I'd want to send from closersrecruiting.io or something like that. So like, I'm going to have 3 burner domains, 2 inboxes per domain. So that's going to be 6 inboxes. And then from that, I could do 50 emails per day per inbox after they're warmed up. So they have to all go through a warm-up process. That would get me to like 300 emails a day. And if I want to scale it further, I got to like scale more inboxes and all of that stuff. So that's how that works. All right. Now, some key points of this is, again, 95% of your success is going to come from the data sourcing. Okay. This is where we had to build a manual team to do it, because the 2 most important things is getting as accurate data as possible. Like, they have to have like the right person, the right contact information. Like, they kind of have to know, like, okay, this looks like a domain from email that's from an older company. This looks like their personal. This might be their current company. So we're going to use these 2. Then we're going to make sure they're clean. And then also they got to make sure they fit like demographically. So for instance, you might tell your team to go after agencies, but there's agencies that are more like internet marketing, and those might be the ones you want to go after, versus like agencies that are full service that only work with mid-market companies that aren't good for your service. Well, your person who's doing the data sourcing, or your team, has to know the difference of those. So that's why the data is like 95% of the success. Okay. Where a lot of people trip up is they're lazy. And they're like, well, I don't have to do this manual data process. I'm smart. I found a tool for it. It's called ZoomInfo. And what they do is they just pull a random list from ZoomInfo because the salesperson told them it's going to be amazing data, or whatever insert lead company you want to use. And then it doesn't really work. And I'm not saying those lead companies don't have good leads. Depending on your industry, it could work or not work. But generally, I've just found that even if you're using those companies, you can't just use those lists at face value. You almost have to use it as a good jump off point and then still go through all of this manual process. So that's it's going to be the biggest thing that makes this work or doesn't work. So we've had to get very creative, because like, we work with people who want to build sales teams and need recruits, but a lot of our focus is in, like, let's say the internet marketing industry, right? So we want to work with like a certain type of person. So for instance, like, what has worked well for us is we'll go to people who like a Hormozi post on Facebook. Anybody who likes that is probably a good person to reach out to. So like, our team will go and look at their profiles. If they're in one of the industries of people we can help, they'll become a lead. We'll reach out to those people after we collect their data manually. So you see how it's like, we kind of have to use these creative, like, jump off points to actually find who it's going to be, and then go find them through the list service, if that makes sense. Okay. Another thing is from a degree of personalization to automation, you kind of want to be right in the middle. So we personalize every single email in the first line. And then after that, it's always the same template. So there's a guy, Alex Berman. Yes, Alex Berman. If you YouTube him, a big part of the system I got for cold email in general is through him. Okay. The big also thing through cold email that's just a huge pain in the butt is that deliverability always needs monitored. And if you're really going to do this, pursue it seriously, you need to learn cold email deliverability. It's like this whole other thing you got to learn because it's tough to figure out if it's always delivering or not. And you could go months with 2 inboxes completely burned. You had no idea. So you really need to research up on how to do this effectively because, this can tank the entire thing. It stinks. Sometimes the leads are generally harder to close. It just depends. Like if you source the leads really well, they're not bad. As you move into colder and colder audiences, they might get harder to close or have longer sales cycles. What I also recommend is focus on building a really high quality list and then recycling that every 90 to 120 days. And you just use a different from name from the email. So it looks like a different rep from your company. Okay. Then we send 1 email and then 3 follow-ups afterwards. So in terms of my results, we're doing 200 to 300 grand a month from this. And again, the biggest bottleneck's always the data. So there's a few things with process and data that we've cracked that I think that this will be a $1 million a month channel with us. And more importantly, this is something that'll help us scale up market because we would rather have people instead of needing a setter who need 10 setters a month, right? And so the only way we're going to find those people on a consistent basis is through a repeatable outbound process, not ads, most likely. So again, deliverability is one of the hardest part. And then our emails, I have a different video on the channel. I can link to it maybe at the bottom in the description, but it shows what the actual email was. It's very direct. It's very similar actually to our ads, believe it or not. But obviously it's written for the median of which cold email is. So some key KPIs here is 2% unique send to set rate and then 20% plus close rate. But this is the big one that I would go after. I think 1% is probably the lowest you want to go, but that's about it. So the next one is very exciting. So this is one we do now and we've done very successfully in the past. So this is the automated upsell auto webinar funnel. So hopefully you can see this on the screen, but you basically run an ad to a webinar registration and they go to a pre-reg page, then they go to an auto webinar. That auto webinar sells them on a $997 to $2,500 product. It could be in certain markets, $497 to $2,500, just kind of depends. Then they go to a thank you page, which is really like the first page for their onboarding. Then from there, they sign a contract. They go to group onboarding or a one-on-one onboarding. We actually do one-on-one onboarding now. And then we do they go into the school community. And then from there, they might go back and end up on a sales call. So the big key thing is here is that there's 2 things. The one that you might know about is that from the one-on-one or group onboarding, we want to basically force everybody to book at least a 15-minute triage to at least kind of look into or see if they're a fit for the high-ticket program. So the 15-minute triage isn't a sales framed thing. It's like a success call where they're going to learn more about the product, And then from there, they're going to go to a sales call. I'll give you the KPIs of what this should be in a second. And then the other thing is from the webinar registration, we basically have, and this is the main thing that makes this funnel work so well for us, is we just have the setters reach out to every single opt-in. And then we don't even mention this $997 or $1,497 or $1,997 product. We just have them do a regular setting call right for the sales call. And we have those closing at about 20%. Okay, so primarily this is going to be for B2C. Even though we're running this for B2B right now and it's working, we just need to figure out a few things to be able to scale further, but that's one thing we're working on right now. And then this is also highly setter dependent. Like obviously this is setter dependent and then the outreach and the initial part is all setter dependent. So it works really well for this. Like the reason we were able to transition to it so well with RCA is we basically ramped the call funnel up to where we're doing about 20 million a year with the call funnel. But 70% of the sets or 70% of the closes were coming from the setters. So I was like, well, this is kind of dumb. The direct bookings aren't doing anything. So I just swapped that funnel out, swapped this funnel in. The setters didn't have any break within their workflow process. And we basically reduced our CAC by almost 10x. So we went from like a $2,000, $2,200 CAC to like $200 in the first month. And it kind of leveled out at like $500 to $700. But we were able to reduce that very quickly by just swapping to this because we already had a high performing setter team. So it's very, very key with this that I would try to have a good setter team before you pivot into it. So the key points is obviously you're not going to be profitable on the front end. You make it work through the back end upsell, but mainly the setter to sales call process. This is what really will make you stand out compared to your competitors because most people don't do this. They only do the back end upsells, which will work. I mean, you should be able to get it profitable there, but you might only be at like a 2 to 3x, not like, we were at like a freaking, at one point, like a 25x with this. Okay. And that was because we had the setters. Now, another thing is I've seen people have essentially, our setters reach out to the opt-ins, book them right for the sales call. Now that works for us. Okay. Maybe it's because we're really good at training setter teams. I don't know. I've seen other people do the same thing, but they book them for a closer to sell the original like $1,000 to $2,000 product. And then they go to the same upgrade process thereafter from that. So either way, I've seen work. I would probably go to the higher ticket thing first as like your first try. But if you're having a trouble getting that to work, go to the $1,000 to $2,000 thing. And then the other thing is too is we've actually tested both and both work. It just depends on the market. For a B2B market, we found, not to do the webinar, but just to make it a VSL. Essentially, it's an embedded Wistia video. And then for B2C, it works better if it's like an actual webinar. So you can test both, but we've seen both work. And then we force all the buyers to go to this group onboarding, the 15-minute triage, and then you'll see the KPIs to go to the sales call after that. So the key KPIs here is 90% plus will end up getting triaged, okay? Out of that, overall, out of all buyers, we'll set about 40%. And then of all buyers, I was looking at our data a second ago from years ago, we would close about 28% upgraded to the next thing of all buyers, okay, of all buyers. So our actual close rate on those upgrade conversations for buyers was probably 40 to 50%, okay? And then the other thing is too, 67% of our total high ticket sales came from the opt-ins and the setters just calling them. So again, like 67%. So you can see like our funnel was 3 times more effective by having the setters reach out to people who didn't buy, didn't even mention the mid-ticket product, just set them right for the high-ticket product, okay? So my results for this, I've already said, we had scaled our B2C call funnel to 1.5 million a month or so, and then CAC was starting to get pretty high. We pivoted to this, and it dropped our CAC to like $500 to $700, so it just increased our profitability like freaking crazy. So the next thing I want to cover is the IG shoutouts funnel. So I wanted to cover this because this is more of a traffic play that can work with almost anything we've covered up into this point. So this works if you already have an existing funnel and you want to diversify, or like sometimes people just can't crack Facebook and they're like experienced good people and they're like, man, I can't crack Facebook, but I know my funnel is like good. And this could be something to where you shift to this traffic model and can start working. But primarily it's going to be like a B2C or maybe a prosumer type of audience. So key points here is, let me go through the funnel. You run a shout out, it goes to your page, okay? Generally in your page, you're gonna have content, all the stuff, study up how to do Instagram content. And then in your link in bio, you're gonna have DM me, hey, if you wanna learn this, but also like a link in bio as well. So like what we do is we have the DM and the link, all right? I found that it's best to do both, all right? Now, we've already covered the DMs. So some people are gonna DM you, direct messenger script. Now, obviously, if they click the link in bio, you're going to either put your call funnel or what worked really well for us is we did the webinar funnel to that plus the shout outs. And that actually liquidated about 20 to 30% higher than even Facebook ads. So we actually ran shout outs traffic and liquidated at some points like 70 to 90% of the budget. And then we ran that whole model and it just absolutely slapped. Okay. So key points here is number one, a lot of times getting into this, you're like, well, how do I do shout outs? I don't know how to do it. I would recommend trying to learn it yourself, hire somebody or figure it out. Like we have training in our stuff for it because we did it internally. We tested having an agency do it at one point, and I'm not kidding. And they were like a reputable agency. So, I mean, I'm not a hater or anything, but we, not joking, had a 20x increase in performance. So like we were 20 times better than the agency. And in my experience, I'm just, if you're pretty savvy at marketing, you could almost beat agencies all the time because you're just going to spend more time on your account than they are. Like they have a ton of clients and that just is what it is. And the big difference that I found working with the agency versus us doing it ourselves was we were just so much better at creative because at the end of the day, we were all spending on the same pages. We just spent way more time on creative. So that was a big thing. The other thing that was really key of doing it ourselves is we had strict tracking. So we were very, very diligent with how we tracked. There's no way to kind of see which pages are producing what sales. But what you can do is like just kind of eyeball it by knowing which pages go out which day and sort of how that lined up with your sales volume. I've seen a combo. I already mentioned this. Combo DMs and link in bio works the best. And again, like what worked really well is having a link in bio to a liquidating thing. If they DM, you just move it to the high ticket. That worked really well for us. And again, like keep in mind, our link in bio, it was liquidating, but all those opt-ins, our setters are reaching out to those people through the phone anyways, okay? And it goes without saying, the better your engagement and your content is, the better the strategy is going to work. So key KPIs for this, I would go for a cost per follower of $1 to $3. It's hard. I'm looking at my data from a while ago. It could be, depending on your market, higher or lower, but we started off getting like 50 cents. Then at scale, it was like $1 to $3. So depending on your scale and kind of how things are, you should be able to hit this pretty well. And then obviously the rest of your funnel metrics are going to be the exact same. You're going to evaluate this the exact same as you would any other funnel. So I'm I'm going to give you a bonus, and these are two models that I have not implemented yet, but I'm thinking about testing. So we might test these if we need to expand or do something different than our B2B webinar that we're running right now. And frankly, I haven't ran these, so credit to Blake Wyatt for kind of teaching me these and showing me these. So the main one is basically you run an ad to a $17 to $47 product, and then you have two bumps. The bumps are within 50 to $100, and then after that, your upsell one is essentially they book a call, right? And it's like framed as like an onboarding call. Then you may have an additional upsell after that. That's not going to do too much AOV contribution. It's going to be like $10, but it'll be something. And then from there, if they book a call, obviously that goes to a triage and you move that triage to a sales call. If they don't book a call, you want to have the setter reach out anyways via outbound and then have them book a sales call. The other version of this is basically you just upsell and squeeze as much out of it and just do the upsell one, upsell two, the bumps and all that stuff. And then really it's only email and setters that are going to drive to the sales call. So who's this for? It's primarily B2C, but generally like you have to have a pretty good marketing skill set to pull this off, and it's relatively advanced. So I'd wait till like you tapped out the call funnel and you want to move on to the next thing. So some key points and KPIs with this. I mean, again, this is not for me running it, but more me modeling this out. Like I modeled out tons of different low ticket self-liquidating models financially kind of on spreadsheets. And then this is sort of the biggest thing that I found was very, very important to get this to work is that, you need a 50% liquidation minimally, I would say, to probably scale this unless like your price point on the back end is super high. So you would have to hit a few bump take metrics and upsell metrics, and then probably about 150 CPA at a $47 price plus like 25 contribution from bump one, $10 contribution from bump two, and a $10 contribution from bump or OTO2 is I think how it modeled out. So however you can get to 50%, you just need to get to 50%. And then it's about 40% take rate on calls and about 40% book rate on calls. So that was the other big thing that I found was really, really important that when I modeled this out, you needed to get. And then the other thing that I think a lot of people running this model don't think about is for the people who don't book, about a 5% outbound lead to set. And then frankly, maybe even higher if you can use Dollar.io to get that to a sales call. And then 25 to 33% plus close rates. If you're not doing the implementation call, you're going to have to get a 10 to 15% outbound lead to set, which is tough. And the only way that you could do that is through Dollar.io, frankly. So a few thoughts is I've seen this work for a lot of people. My concern being B2B is that some of these book calls may not be qualified and it wastes a lot of our setters' time. So, if I do test it, I'll let you know how it goes. And of course, you need a great setter team to make this work, just like with anything else. So if you don't have that, it's tough to make this work from the very beginning because you kind of got to train the setter team and make sure they're good and acquire that skill set before you move to this. So if we test this, it works, I'll let you know. But DM me funnels if you want this doc. Everything's on my DM me on Instagram funnels for this doc at Cole Thomas Gordon. And if you we talked a lot about setters. If you want to know more about setters, here's a video on that. I'll also link it right here. We'll see you.